Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to talk about the determinants of elasticity of supply. So if you remember when we did the demand side, we talked about the formulas for elasticity on the demand side, and then we talked about the elasticity of the entire curve and what determines how elastic or inelastic a demand curve is. We're going to do the same thing on the supply side, but we're going to look just at the determinants of elasticity of supply. We're not going to do the calculations. So there's only one determinant of elasticity of supply, and that is time. Time is the one thing that will determine how inelastic or elastic a supply curve is. So to think about this, let's kind of start with a little story or scenario. So let's imagine that we have a farmer, and they are and they're growing watermelons, and so here's I don't know if this is what a watermelon farm looks like, but here it is, and we're growing some watermelons here, and those are supposed to be seeds, and I guess you probably can't really see the seeds, the watermelon, but there they are. And so we got these watermelons growing in the field, and so this farmer grows his watermelon, and then he puts them in his pickup truck. So here's going to be my little pickup truck. And let's say this guy's in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and he's got his little pickup truck, and he fills it up with watermelon, and he's going to take these watermelons to market, and he's going to take them down to Philadelphia. Okay, so he's going to come down here to Philly, and he sets up a little stand, and he's going to sell his watermelons. And let's say that he does this maybe on Saturday mornings. He gets down there, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, sets up his stand, and starts selling watermelons. And let's say on one day in particular, for whatever reason, you get a big increase in the price of watermelons. Okay, for some reason, lots of people are wanting to buy watermelons on this Saturday morning. I don't know, it's a nice morning, it's a little warm, people are out taking walks, whatever, and they're buying up this good Lancaster County fresh fruit. So they're buying up these watermelons. And so what's going to happen to the guy as the price goes up, what he would like to do is he would like to sell more watermelons. But let's say by maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, he's sold all his watermelons. He has no more left to sell. And so what's he going to do? Well, in the short run, he can't do anything. Actually, what we'll call not the short run, but actually the immediate run. So here's what our three graphs are going to look like. We're going to make a distinction between the immediate run, the short run, and the long run. So in the immediate run, that means right now, if the price of watermelons goes up, he is not going to be able to bring any more watermelons to market. Why not? Because the watermelons are all back in Lancaster County. Okay, so whatever watermelon that he brought to Philly that day, if it all sold out by 8 o'clock in the morning, then that's it. He cannot sell any more watermelon in the immediate run. So let's see what that looks like on the graph. So here's my quantity of watermelon on the horizontal axis, my price of watermelon on the vertical, and we have a perfectly inelastic supply curve in the immediate run. So why is that perfectly inelastic? Well, if the price of watermelon is P1 and he brought Q1 watermelons to market, and the price gets bid up on this Saturday morning as I described, the price gets bid up to P2, well, he could still only bring Q1 units of watermelon to market. You see, he can't increase his quantity supplied because he just doesn't have enough time to bring more watermelons to market. And so that time is the key. The price goes up, and he does not have time to bring more watermelon to market. Now, what he could do, let's say the price continues to stay high, what he could do is at 8 o'clock in the morning, he gets on the phone and he calls his wife and says, hey, get the kids together, fill up the other truck with watermelons or the station wagon or whatever, and bring as many watermelons down here to Philly as you possibly can because they're selling like crazy. And so she does that. They go out and they get some watermelons and they fill up the station wagon. I don't know, we'll try to draw a station wagon here. That's a really bad picture of a station wagon. So there's the station wagon, and they fill that up with watermelon, and off they go. Okay, so watermelons, boom, into the station wagon. They drive it down, and now they can sell additional watermelon that morning. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call the short run. If you give me a little bit more time, if you give that farmer a little bit more time, then he can respond to that higher price by bringing some additional watermelons. Not a lot, whatever he can fit in his station wagon, but he can bring additional watermelons to market. See, so time is the key. In the immediate run, he cannot bring more watermelon to market. He just doesn't have time. But in the short run, if you give them a couple hours, by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, they can have more watermelon down at their stand in Philadelphia. So the higher price will lead to a higher quantity supplied. And then in the long run, if he has a lot of time, well, then he can respond to all of this, to these higher prices. Let's say the prices stay higher for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and maybe for months and for a year. He could actually go back to Lancaster County and he could rent an additional plot, and he could grow more watermelons, and maybe he could hire some additional workers, and he could buy a couple more trucks, and he could have 5 or 6 guys coming down and selling watermelon in Philadelphia. And so as the price stays high, in the long run, he now has more time to respond to the higher price and bring more watermelon to market. So what we're saying here is, the longer the time period, the more elastic will become the supply curve. Okay, the greater the time period, the more elastic will become the supply curve. In the immediate run, it's very inelastic. Okay, I cannot respond to the higher price by bringing more of the good to market. In the short run, the supply curve is very inelastic. If the price goes up, I can respond to that by bringing a little bit more of the good to market. And in the long run, I have a lot of time to respond to the higher price by bringing a lot more of the good to market. So my example was with farming and watermelons, but this is true for any good or service. The more time you have to respond to higher prices, the greater will be the increase in the quantity supplied. So let me just say that one more time. The determinant of supply, of elasticity of supply, is time. And in the immediate run, perfectly inelastic. In the short run, inelastic. In the long run, elastic. The longer the time period, the more elastic will be the supply curve. All right, thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast, and we'll see you next time on the next Econ Podcast.